A Musical Life with Andrew Hitz, former tuba player for the Boston Brass and host of the Entrepreneurial Musician podcast. Andrew Hitz was a 14-year member of the Boston Brass before leaving to become a musical entrepreneur, podcast host, and co-founder of Pedal Note Media, a digital media company providing products and programs to educate, entertain, and inspire music teachers, players, and fans. This episode of A Musical Life is brought to you by A Musical Life Mastermind. What is a mastermind? A mastermind is a group of peers that encourage, support, and share ideas to help each other achieve success. My goal for this mastermind group is to equip you with everything you need to create your own business or career track as a musician and artist. Through webinars, tutorials, forums, and live mastermind video meetings, you'll get personalized help and inspiration to achieve your musical dreams. To learn more, visit amusicallifemastermind.com. Once again, that web address is amusicallifemastermind.com. Welcome to A Musical Life. I'm Hugh Sung. We're continuing our month-long series on music podcasters and entrepreneurs. Most classical musicians dream of winning a major orchestra job or touring the world as a soloist or with a successful ensemble. But after 14 years of being on the road 200 days out of the year, Andrew Hitz decided that he wanted to find a different path that would enable him to entertain, teach, and inspire more musicians and fans while giving him more time to spend with his family. Hold on to your horses and get a pencil or your favorite note-taking app ready. What you're about to listen to is the equivalent of a 1-hour crash course, equivalent to a full MBA, marketing degree, and even a primer on what you need to start your own podcast. Andrew, welcome to the show, a fellow podcaster. How exciting.
Thank you so much for having me, Hugh.
Absolutely. Now, I understand that you are a professional tuba player. Do we call them tubists?
You can call us tubists. You can call us tuba players. Whatever you prefer.
What is your preferred term among the tuba community?
That is something that I have not designated any brain power to. I don't think I. And if my wife were on the line, she'd tell you how full of opinions I am. So you'd think that I would have an answer to that ready to go. But I've got like an 8-hour drive tomorrow. Maybe I'll think about it on the way.
There you go. It's the same. It's a similar question among flute players. Are you a flutist or a flautist? Are you a piano player? Are you a pianist? Pianist?
Pianoist. I like it.
Anyway, so I'm just going to say professional tuba player just to be safe.
Perfect.
So you've actually you performed.
Safety first.
Sure. And there you go. So you've performed with the National Symphony Orchestra, the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, and the Marine Band of Mexico, and you were also with this group called the Boston Brass for 14 years. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about the Boston Brass, which, from what I understand, has been around for about 30 years.
Sure. It has been around for 30 years. There is one original founding member remaining, whose name is Jeff Connor. And back when Jeff had just finished graduate school at Boston University, which I always enjoyed pointing out to him was when I was 11, just to try and make him feel try and make him feel old. Back in 1986. And a bunch of people listening just said, "You're 40, dude. Yeah, you ain't that young yourself," which is true. This was a student group at Boston University that ended up, quote unquote, making it. Which it's great to hear Jeff. And I actually interviewed Jeff for my Entrepreneurial Musician podcast about this very thing. But Jeff talks about how they went from playing weddings and graduation ceremonies, etc., to eventually during my 14 years, that was when we had our first international gig, and we ended up playing in about 35 countries on 4 different continents.
Wow.
And 40 the band has played in 49 of the 50 states, and everything but Hawaii. And yeah, exactly. We've been to Alaska like 4 or 5 times too. So but that's frequently how the music business works. You get somewhere and you do a good job, and then you've got some roots, in terms of the networking built in there, and then you're much more likely it's easier to get back somewhere than it is to get somewhere the first time. So, and the group is still going strong. I stepped down about 2.5 years ago, and was actually replaced by my mentor, which was kind of an interesting handoff. His name is Sam Palafian, who has had one of the most. He's a legend in the brass world, and he has had a career that, when you start to read all of the people that he has performed with, it doesn't seem like it's real. It's really a stunning career, and he was a founding member of the Empire Brass Quintet back in the 70s. Who were in a whole lot of people's opinions, and in my opinion, in their heyday, they were the greatest brass quintet ever, and were one of the best chamber groups in the world. They were just stunning virtuosos and artists. And he was off the road for 20 years and decided he wanted to get back on the road, and which I've told him he's nuts. But he, when Sam Palafian says he'd like to be in your brass quintet, if you have someone, you would literally shove them out of the way and take him in. So no, that didn't happen, but that's how good he is that you would do anything to get him in your band. So,
well, even so, was it painful? I mean, this was an ensemble you were with for such a long time, and as good as your mentor was it uncomfortable?
No, that's a great question. We were on the road towards the end, combined with my solo travel and solo teaching travel. I was on the road like pushing 200 days a year.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and so it was the road can feel and I have to be. There's a huge. A huge caveat here that if you complain about being paid well to travel the world playing your instrument, especially when that instrument is the tuba, which has a lot less employment opportunities like this than say a great piano player, then you can be off-putting really quickly. So I'm certainly not looking for anyone to add me to their prayers. But the road was when I first joined the group. I was actually in the middle of graduate school and won the audition with Boston Brass. Mid-degree, which was a dream. I mean, I was very lucky. There was not a single day or even 5 minutes that I had to worry what I was going to do between school and getting a job. And so the road was a dream at that point, and everything was new, and it was very exciting. Fast forward, I met my now wife, and got a dog, and bought a house, and started just getting roots here. And when I first joined, there was nothing that I was leaving at home, other than I even brought my PlayStation on the road with me. So, there was literally nothing that I left at home that I wouldn't that I was missing. So, and my wife and I wanted to start a family. So, and sure enough, we've got a son who just turned 2 last month.
Oh,
So,
congratulations.
yeah,
Wonderful.
yep, and a lot of people very successfully have road careers and raise happy and healthy kids. And I have absolutely no opinion of that. I just knew that I didn't want to be raising my kid over FaceTime if I could help it. So so that was the main reason. And also with Boston Brass, and again, this is a really good thing, but we were so busy that it didn't enable me to explore a lot of other interests, even within music that I had. Which again, when your main thing is going so well that you don't have time to branch out, that's not something that you generally should complain about. So there were kind of a number of reasons, some of them professional and a lot of them personal, where it eventually became obvious to me that it was time to step down, and it really is one of the best decisions that I ever made.
It's a very wise decision too, particularly in light of your son. So congratulations on making, I think, a great life and fatherly decision.
Yeah.
I've just a question. When you joined them, so if my math is good, you're probably within their 14th year. If you were with them for 14 years and you left about 2 years ago, they're kind of midway to where they are now. What was their How busy were they when you first joined them? And was it a full-time career at that point, or was it just sort of a few gigs here and there on the road, and then it just grew from that point?
It was actually a full-time gig at the time. It was a little less busy than it was a little less busy than we were towards the end. The group turned I guess 30 this year. So it's funny. It seems like this is how you can tell that you're getting older. Is that it seems like we just celebrated the 25th anniversary like last year, and I've obviously been out for 2.5, so I didn't celebrate anything with them last year. So yeah, no, that was 5 years ago. So the group for a number of years was a local group. Boston, as the result of Empire Brass, who were based out of Boston,
Okay.
had this crazy thriving brass quintet scene in the 1980s. There were 5 or 6 really good brass quintets who all were working quite a bit, and who started the Atlantic Brass, who are still around, Epic Brass, Paramount Brass, Boston Brass, and then Empire Brass was, of course, they were in residence at Boston University, and a lot of us in those groups studied with the Empire Brass at Tanglewood. So there was this thriving brass quintet scene. And Boston Brass came out of that, and the group was around for a full, it was a little over a decade before, as just a local group. And then in particular hired J.D. Shaw, who is now the professor of horn at the University of South Carolina. And he was in the Rochester Philharmonic and was playing, I think, associate principal horn in the Rochester Philharmonic. And he had played a summer with Vienna, Phil, and he had finally made it, in quotes, like he had won his job, and it turned out that he was miserable in that section, and very similar to the discussion you had with Holly Mulcahy with her first orchestra gig. Which anyone that hasn't heard that episode of this podcast, go check it out because she's awesome.
Yes.
But so he auditioned for Boston Brass, which at the time was a huge pay cut from Rochester, because again, this was a very successful local group, but it was a local group, meaning, and not playing concerts, more playing services, if you will. And with concerts smattered here and there. And JD actually brought his incredible arranging skills, and Boston Brass, as I'm told, this is just a few years before I joined, became producers of chamber music rather than just consumers, meaning not playing other people's arrangements and playing their own arrangements, and kind of developed their own sound. And so I got in just after that shift happened. And then that's really when things started to take off, was when, Boston Brass started to kind of develop its own voice and not just be, five really good brass players playing other people's music.
I want to center on that statement that you just
Mm-hmm.
made. The fact that you took on at that point, creating your own sound, creating your own arrangements, being truly unique rather than just musical interpreters, which I would venture, I'm just going to say roughly, I would guess that 99% of musicians trained in conservatories and music schools are trained to be. We just reinterpret other people's music. And it seems to be very difficult for classical musicians to get it into their head to work more like pop stars. Pop stars they'll do covers when they're, just getting started, but they quickly are trying to create their own sound right from the get-go, their own songs,
Sure.
their own music, their own
Yes.
materials. And it seems that in the classical world, I'm just very broad generalizations, those ensembles or musicians that have the courage to create their own content seem to do really, really well.
Yes, I could not agree with you more. One of the interviews I did for the Entrepreneurial Musician was with a Canadian jazz piano player by the name of Ron Davis, which is a fascinating conversation. And he talked about the dangers as a musician of being fungible, which of course means interchangeable. And when Boston Brass, before JD joined and before he started writing and they developed their own sound and their own repertoire and their own all that stuff, was completely fungible with other really good brass quintets. And the people in Boston Brass were really exceptional. But the problem is that if the people who are hiring, let's say both you and I are professional piano players, and that you are better than I am, that I'm still a professional, I'm really good, but you're better than I am. If the person hiring doesn't have the ear to even hear that you're better than I am, then that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And you don't have the opportunity to convince them. They just hear two really great piano players. So at that point, if you're charging X and I'm charging 80% of X, and they hear two really good piano players with nice headshots and whatever, they're gonna hire me because you're more expensive and they can't hear the difference.
Yep.
If you have your own completely different, take, sound, whatever, then. And say both of us do, then at that point, they may very well choose the storytelling, if you will, that you're presenting versus the storytelling that I'm presenting, or vice versa. But then, when you're fungible, it is a race to the bottom, and the only differentiator at that point is price point, and that's how we all lose.
Yeah,
is when you're just a standard brass quintet. And I don't want to minimize how much work goes into being just a, in quotes, standard brass quintet that's really great and plays in tune and in time and can play, just that's done all of the work. But if that's all that you've done, then you're fungible, and then it's hard to, at that point, it's hard to monetize for a living wage what you're doing.
I'm going to go even a step further.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's hard work to be in a chamber ensemble or brass group or even a string quartet, in a way, the road is already pre-carved out for you. I mean, you know what it takes to play in tune. You know what it takes to play in rhythm. The notes are already written for you. The interpretation is already, quote unquote, known. And it's just a matter of you working really hard to make it sound as good as you can.
Yep.
Compared to, okay, who are we? What is our sound? How do we create something truly original? That's a lot harder.
I couldn't agree more. I've already said that once. I think I'm going to say that a bunch because you and I view a lot of things very similarly.
Yeah.
I am really good friends with Time for Three, which is another group that you interviewed, which was a fantastic interview. And I've known Renan and Nick since, and also Zach, who is kind of in the process of being on his way out to just do the concertmaster of Indianapolis full time. But I've known them since we've known each other since any of us had gigs, and since before Time for Three was anything that anybody had heard of. But Time for Three is not. They're not just the best version of two violins and a bass playing, classically trained garage band music.
There are no two
they're
violins and bass
yes,
groups.
exactly, exactly.
They're
Now,
completely unique that way. Yeah.
yes, and some people will hear them and just think, yeah, they're really talented, but I don't need to hear that anymore. Of course, you're never going to please anybody, even when you're as phenomenal as those guys are. But there are people like me who, aside from the fact that I'm great friends with them, that I heard them and I lost my mind. I was like, you guys are going to you're going to be famous. Like this is going to take the world by storm. And that's exactly what it is. And so you're right. They have blazed their own path entirely, which is, it's a lot easier to blaze your own path than to blaze a path that's already been traveled so much and then to just do it better. And case in point, the first, everyone knows the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean was Charles Lindbergh. Nobody knows the second guy, who I don't remember his name, but he did it right after Lindbergh did. He did it in less time and he used less fuel. He was a better pilot by every single metric, but he wasn't first. That being said, everyone knows who the third person was, and it's not because they were the third person. It's because they were the first person in their own category, and that's Amelia Earhart. And that's because she was the first woman. And so if you can create your own category, then by definition, you're going to be first in your own category. And it's so much easier to get traction. And to have impact, which impact is what directly equates to monetization. If you are first in a space or in a category, rather than being the 9,000th string quartet to come up. And don't let me or anybody else tell you that that you can't record the Bartok string quartets better than anyone else ever has. There's going to be some recording of that in the next 20 years. It's going to take the world by storm. But man, is that a crowded market already? I mean, we could for the next 5 minutes we could name famous string quartets who have already done really renowned recordings of those six pieces. So kind of blazing your own path is absolutely the way to go in the music business today.
We are already naturally, I think, as two entrepreneurs, I think we're revealing our focus.
Right.
We love talking about entrepreneurship, and that's really the new buzzword in music schools these days. I think more and more conservatories, music programs are realizing how critical it's becoming to give their students entrepreneurial tools for the future. And I believe there was an article in Forbes magazine recently that spoke to the fact that up to 40% of the workforce in the future will be freelancers. The traditional jobs are disappearing. Right. So it just so happens that you've actually spoken about entrepreneurship and music business at several prominent universities and colleges like Carnegie Mellon, University of Georgia. And there's this really interesting program that you participated in at the University of South Carolina called the Savvy Musician, and specifically the Savvy Musician in Action Retreat. Can you tell me a little bit about this program? Because I interviewed Greg Sandow. He mentioned the University of South Carolina, and I assume he's referring to this particular program, which he was so impressed with.
Yeah, I would be happy to. The director of entrepreneurship at the University of South Carolina is David Cutler, and David Cutler is one of my dearest friends, and so I hate saying this because he's a dear friend, but he's a genius. He really is a genius. I don't like saying nice things like that nice about my friends.
Oh well, I don't want to be your friend, Andrew.
His mind, he's like a mad scientist. He really is. I play in a quartet with him called Cones and Tones. And he's just his brain is just functioning on a level that most of ours isn't functioning on. He's a brilliant piano player, classically, jazz. If you were to hear him on either of those, obviously both of those are really wide terms, but if you were to hear him playing either improvising or playing classical music first, then you would swear that was his home base. That's how good he is. But he's also this incredible teacher, and he has created this thing called the Savvy Musician in Action Retreat, which is, as we sit here recording this now, this year's version is happening in 2 weeks, I believe. But he brought me in the first year to be a thought leader, talking about marketing and social media in particular. And it's in a good way. It's a really hard program to summarize in 20 seconds. It's very hands-on. Cutler was very adamant that he did not want to get an event where most events you go and you pay a whole bunch of money and you go to a fancy hotel and then you sit in a ballroom and then some phenomenal speaker, talks to you and inspires you and fires you up. And then the next one does the same thing and the next one does the same thing. And then you go home. And he wanted it to be much more hands-on. And the participants actually break up into teams. Even how they do that is pretty fascinating. Everyone has to have an elevator pitch about a sustainable money-making idea within the music business. And everyone gives their elevator pitch at the beginning, and then they all split up. Excuse me, they all split up, and they then you have to come up with teams, and you either have to convince people that they need to come to your idea and that your idea is what the group's going to work on, or you need to find a group to work on. So these teams form, and then over the course of about 3 days, you have to come up with a full financial plan, with a logo. You have to do case studies, it's like an exhaustive business model canvas is what you go through over these 3 days, with some of these teams staying up all night long, especially the night before. And then the whole thing culminates in pitching your ideas to three business leaders from Columbia, South Carolina. And then a winning team is selected. And the word I like to use is transformative. It's a truly transformative experience. And the people that come through there as thought leaders to speak are just phenomenal. I couldn't recommend it any more highly to anyone who that even remotely sounds interesting to. It is guaranteed to get you out of your comfort zone, which is the most important thing possible. Some of it you'll be a natural at, and then other things you will have never dealt with before. And as an entrepreneur, you need to figure out quickly if you're going to succeed, whether what you can do, what you can't do. And then in that second half, what you can't do, you need to figure out what you should take the time and the resources to learn how to do. And if not, who you need to partner with or who you need to outsource it to. And this experience will help you to get to know yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses more than any other 3 or 4 day thing that I could imagine. So yeah, it's really wonderful.
Now, is this limited to college age students, or is there an upper age limit?
There is not. When I was, there were even some, there were some established professionals who were enrolled. I'd say students, but some of them were as young as 20, and I think that there was a woman there who was probably in her late 50s, maybe early 60s. So yeah, kind of it skews a little bit towards the younger, like towards the 20s, but yeah, it's and the networking is just, these are the people that are willing to go all the way there to spend 5 days doing something immersive like this. Those are exactly the people that you want to be surrounding yourself with. And the networking opportunities are just phenomenal.
So tell me about what you contributed to this incredible retreat as a thought leader with a specialty in social media marketing.
So I did one overall talk to them, which was about marketing and about arts marketing. Which the main point of that is that arts marketing is just like any other marketing. That selling a 2 violin and bass trio is the exact same process as Procter and Gamble selling a tube of toothpaste.
That sounds, for a musician, that almost sounds so anti-artistic, so anti-creative. It jars at our artistic sensibilities. Can you speak to that?
Sure. The way to well, and this is obviously this isn't really an oversimplification. The way to make money is to solve problems for people, and your podcast is solving problems for people. So are the manufacturers of whatever brand of toothpaste you use is solving a problem for you.
I'm going to
Uh,
interject because I think I could be wrong, but in the minds of many musicians that I've spoken to, they're not out to solve problems. They're out to create something beautiful and inspiring that will uplift people. It's not to get your teeth cleaner. It's not to,
sure.
fix
Yeah,
a tire
of
in those
course.
senses.
Well, the problem that those people are solving is that that there are a lot of us who have a strong need to be inspired regularly, and that is the problem that they are solving
That's an
at that.
interesting way of looking at it. Okay.
Yeah. And so the empowering thing about recognizing that selling something, and the other thing about a lot of artists have a very negative connotation with selling themselves, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and that's something that I plead with musicians if I do consulting work, if I'm consulting with them, or through my podcast, that I plead them to get over very quickly. Now, I'm not in any way opposed to art for the sake of art, and that's it. That I think that that's very important, but you need to be cautious. I would suggest you need to be cautious for just making art for the sake of art and then being baffled as to why you're not making as much money as you would like to make. Because again, if and this goes for widget makers as well. If you produce a widget that it could be an awesome widget that's really like that's just top notch engineering, and that you're able to manufacture from recycled goods and this and it's made here in the United States. And I mean, you can have all these selling points. If no one needs your widget, no one's going to buy it. So it doesn't matter how well it's engineered. It doesn't matter that it's eco-friendly or that it's made in America or that, any of the above. So in a lot of people, a lot of business books you read, you hear a lot of people warning about people who start to make something or provide a service that they haven't confirmed that anyone needs yet. And I know that you were going to ask about this a little bit later, but in terms of where Pedal Note Media came from, there's something called a business model canvas, which is a really great exercise. That's exactly what my partner Lance Leduc and I did to kind of to figure out exactly what we wanted. Well, we didn't even know it was going to be a digital media company, let alone what the name of it was. But we identified a group of people who had a need, and then we figured out, we figured out we had to make sure that we were the people that were going to best solve that need. And your podcast is a great example where are you the first podcast? No, of course not. Are you the first podcast about music or about musicians? No, of course not. But anyone who has listened to a number of episodes of this podcast, which I'm guessing if you're listening to my voice now, then you have, then you know that your podcast definitely has its own voice, and the tone that you set, which I think is wonderful, with the interview, with the interviewees, et cetera. It is its own beast. And so you are, and you're not marketing this podcast to the entire world. At that point, when you market to everyone, you market to no one at all. Also, neither my neighbors here in the townhouse I live in on my left or on my right are ever going to hire you to teach them online piano lessons. And that's because they don't play the piano, right? So you're obviously not marketing to them either. Because if your plan is to convince them to play the piano, to buy a piano, and then get to the point where they want to take lessons and then hire you, that seems like a long walk for a short drink. So, so you don't, so you don't try to market to absolutely everyone. So, but the cool thing is that if you agree with that premise that selling even art is like selling anything else, then suddenly the entire world of marketing books and of marketing podcasts and of marketing blogs and things like that, some of which have absolutely nothing to do with art whatsoever, they're all relevant all of a sudden, and they can all help you. And a lot of marketing materials. The gist of my presentation was. I gave example after example, and Time for Three was was absolutely an example I used of artists who have who have kind of blazed their own trail, and that when you're remarkable, then you're worth excuse me, you're worth remarking about. And that's what marketing is. And so if you have a remarkable product, whether that product is a string trio or piano lessons or a podcast or a widget, then it makes the marketing a lot easier. And if you're not that good at piano lessons, and the interface online isn't very good, and people are like, yeah, it's fine, but no one's recommending your online piano lessons to anyone else, then it's very hard to market that product. So so then once I started researching that, I started looking for examples within the business. And it's it's a wormhole. It's great because you can just start to kind of reverse engineer whatever you're doing, starting with trying to be remarkable to begin with. And I don't mean that in an ego way. I don't mean that like, oh, listen to my Fountains of Rome excerpt, it's so good. I just mean, something that's worth, if anytime as a consultant that I have someone tell me that they are going to be starting a brass quintet, which is two trumpets, French horn, trombone, tuba is the standard instrumentation. My one word response to that is always why. And that's not because the world absolutely has no need for another brass quintet to ever be formed again. But what I tell them, if I'm talking to a trombone player, what I tell them is if they have a trio that's trombone and viola and an alto singer, then like, I'm clicking on that link. What the heck does that sound like? Like why on earth would someone do that? And I don't mean that I would assume that it would sound bad, but just like my brain can't even wrap. Now, if I listen to it and it doesn't sound, it's not like I kept listening to Time for Three just because they're my friends or just because it's original. So I wanted to reward them. Obviously, we're bombarded by messages all day long, just constantly. And so the hard part is getting noticed nowadays. And the gatekeepers have vanished for everyone, which is really, really, really exciting. Anyone can make a recording. You do not need to have a recording studio or a recording or record label grant you permission and say, Hugh Sung, you are worthy of making a piano record. And then that was not very long ago that's exactly how that needed to happen.
Very true.
And anyone can write a book. You do not need to have a major publishing house in New York City tell you, Hugh Sung, you are worthy of writing a book. And what's your idea? And they're like, yeah, okay, but actually you're going to write this. And then you have to say, okay. And then they say, well, and actually we're going to title it this. And you have to say, okay. Or they can say, or you can find someone else. Anyone can write a book. Anyone can make a recording. Anyone can make a movie. Anyone can have a podcast. That's the great news. It's the most exciting time in history to be a content creator. The bad news is that the gatekeepers have vanished for everyone in the entire world. And that's what, one of the main thrusts of my talk about marketing and then using social media as a tool is that the hardest thing now is to, and this doesn't minimize how that I want to make sure I'm not making it sound like it's just easy to teach online piano lessons really, really, really well and to just set up an incredible interface and all of that stuff. Of course it's not. There are people that are good and there are people that are great, but the really hard part is getting noticed at this point. And is getting your trio or your, heard or your poetry read or your play seen, et cetera. And that's why marketing is just so imperative in 2016. And I think it's only going to be more imperative with every year that moves forward.
So thank you so much for sharing so much of that marketing and business savvy and insight. If you don't mind, I'd like to step back in time a little bit and take you back to when you're on the road with the Boston Brass, you're feeling burned out. Well, maybe I'm assuming you're feeling burned out, but you're feeling like, I'd rather be home with my wife and want to raise a family. I'm getting ready to settle down. This is paying my salary. This is paying me money.
Right.
What did you have in plan to transition from being paid from this group to another source of income? Did you have those teaching positions at the other colleges and universities lined up before you decided to leave them, or did that come afterwards?
It was right around the same time. I had an inkling that I was looking to get off of the road probably about 4 years before I actually pulled the trigger.
Hmm.
And it was hard. Again, yeah, this is something that that in the music business, like when you have a job, that's the holy grail. Like, why on earth would you ever give that up?
Yeah. Yeah.
There are, yeah, I can count on one hand, on less than one hand, the number of brass quintets in the United States that work as much as Boston Brass does.
Hmm. So
So
how did you transition? I mean, so you
so
made the decision to leave. Financially, what did you have in place to make that leap?
Well, I realized that my name recognition, that I had a lot of name recognition as the tuba player for Boston Brass, and I had some as Andrew Hitz. And I realized that if I left Boston Brass, that a lot of that recognition, again, just the ability to be found, if you will, was going to go away. So that's when I started my blog, and that's when I started my website, andrewhitz.com. That's when I decided to write my first book. That's when, so I started ramping up a whole lot of content streams that were not relating to Boston Brass at all. And then that's when the teaching positions came. And then my solo career started picking up. And then
Wow.
I was asked to come and do more, appearances for teaching and residencies and things like that. And so, and then I had them kind of going in parallel for a little while, which was exactly the plan. And then it enabled me to be able to then leave Boston Brass and to then pick back up, or to keep going with all of the solo stuff. And one thing I also wanted to, one more layer that I went was that I didn't want to. I'm fortunate that I tend to get paid well when I'm in, when someone asks me to be in a specific place at a specific time with my tuba. I get paid well for that, but that's not scalable if I want to be spending a lot of time with my family.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I didn't want to just replace it with a ton of solo travel,
Which
which
would
is why.
put you right back to the situation
eh,
you were with Boston Brass.
Exactly. And the one major difference, and this month actually is pretty is for how my life is now, is crazy. I was in Pittsburgh for a gig about 2 weeks ago, and then I was just in Chicago for a couple of gigs last week, and tomorrow I'm heading to Knoxville, Tennessee for a conference for 5 days. But this is an abnormal, in terms of that much stuff. But I wanted some passive income generators along the lines of,
Whoa.
like
Okay.
the book, which is like a bunch of work up front, and then you still have to. There are so many books out there that if you write a book and then you don't publicize it, and or you just, if I were to stop blogging and stop podcasting and stop being on social media and all of that, no one's going to even think about my book, let alone buy it.
Hmm.
So it's not like. It's not you still have to be present, and still have to be offering people things through those channels, but that is much more. It's easier than me just. I don't want to be on the road 100 days a year. Maybe 20 years from now, like my mentor decided, maybe I'll want to go back out on the road. Who knows?
Hmm.
Right now, I think that I would have a better chance of winning Powerball than of that happening. But but I'm also not going to claim to know that I'm going to know what I'm going to want in the year 2033. Who the heck knows? So that was kind of the timeline, and that was so how I ramped it up was actually quite intentional.
That's fascinating. And it sounds like you were very good at it right from the get-go in terms of
Well,
blogging, podcasting, not only one podcast, but through Pedal Note Media, you actually produced two podcasts, The Brass
yeah.
Junkies, which you co-host with Lance LeDuc, and The Entrepreneurial Musician, which you host yourself. So how did you get so good so quickly?
Well, that's I remember we were on tour in Brazil, and I was reading a book by Gary Vaynerchuk called Crush It, which is this awesome book. If you're interested in content creation and kind of doing your own thing and blazing your own path, and you read that book and it doesn't fire you up, then I would tell you to go to law school or something else. Just some more lucrative, and easier path. It's awesome. And one of my favorite quotes, Daniel Pink, who's another author, he says that the key to having great ideas is having lots of ideas. And this Vaynerchuk book had convinced me I got to have my own website. So I then thought, okay, what could I do? And I was like, well, maybe I'll have something called Brass Hub, where it would be a website for brass players where I could list job openings, and I could have maybe different blogs for the different instruments and pedagogy and that kind of thing. And that would be a way to maintain my visibility, in the business, because that was the nice thing about being in a chamber group. You could be the tuba player. Alan Baer in the New York Philharmonic is he's quite famous. He's in the New York Philharmonic, but at the same time, there's a lot of non-tuba players that don't know him because he sits in the back and he does a phenomenal, people know you when you don't do your job well back there, in Boston Brass, I was playing in some of the best concert halls in the world. There were 5 of us and we were at the front of the stage, and you were reading my bio. You don't read the tuba player's bio in an orchestra program. And then that was going to go away. So I thought Brass Hub was taken. When
you say Brass Hub was taken, you're talking about the website name?
Yeah, the website name, and just there was so brasshub.com, and also just the concept was already being done by somebody.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, that's fine. And then I said, well, but I could still, I think, do my own wrinkle on this concept. And then I thought, actually, I can, how about Brass Hitz, which is my last name? And, right? And so that's good. So I then, and I'm thinking that's good. So I type it into hover.com to see if the domain has already been reserved or is being used. And as I typed it in, I realized that Brass Hitz, when you type that in, looks like bras and then SHITZ. And so, and I just lowered my head and I just had this huge smile and I was like, I don't think that's a good it's shockingly that URL was available, and I bet still is. So
the strange permutations of the English language,
right? Exactly. So the point is that I had a lot of ideas and I didn't really know what and then I started blogging, and then I kind of found my voice with the blog, and then the Brass Junkies was such that, what Lance and I figured out was that we had, through our job, we had access to the best brass players in the world, and that there were a whole lot of people who would love to hear from Joe Alessi, the principal trombone, arguably the most famous trombone player in the world, who's principal of the New York Philharmonic. Just about him and how he got started, and about how his mother was an opera singer, and about, just all of these things. And he's a very personable guy, but most people don't have the opportunity to meet him. And if I text Joe, he texts me back because we're friends. And again,
Wow.
it's just circumstance, it's just through career paths. And so that's what I thought, now there's a problem that we could solve for people, because people who are, who are either way into brass music or who are up and coming, that want to hear the stories of how these people won these auditions and how this and that. And we have access to them. And sure enough, and then even that, if you listen to the, I was interviewed by, it hasn't even come out yet, but a podcast called Composer on Fire by Garrett Hope. And he talked about how when someone finds this podcast and then they say that they really like it, and then they then go back and they listen to all of the episodes, they start at the beginning. And he and I were both joking. We were like, don't start at the beginning. If you really like the podcast, start at the end and work backwards. Because if you hear, now for TEM, I kind of hit the ground running because I told Renan Meyer, I phrased it as a quote unquote question. I was like, hey, Renan, you're going to be my first interview on this podcast. And he's like a brother, so he had to be okay. So he didn't get to say, well, can I maybe let you feel your way? I was like, no, you're the first guy and I'm calling you tomorrow. So, but the point is that you get your voice eventually, and that with a blog, you get your voice eventually, and that you have to, Seth Godin talks all about fear and about always be shipping, is what he says. And, you have to, the first tuba book that, the book that I did, A Band Director's Guide to Everything Tuba, a collection of interviews with the experts. I actually had one of my students transcribe one of the interviews, and there was some grammatical errors, like their
Yeah,
THERE was
sure.
THEIR. And it turns out that my proofreading skills are not nearly as good as they need to be.
Hmm.
And I make a whole lot of mistakes on a whole lot of things. I don't pretty much ever make a mistake of there. And so I wasn't even looking for that. But the point is that there was a bunch of typos, and not hundreds, but there were a number of typos in the first edition of that. And did that make me happy? No, of course not. Did I want them to be there? No, but like the point is that you just gotta get it out, and now for the second book, which is coming out next week, I've got a system in place now, and I have someone who edits it, and I have someone else who helps me with formatting and things, and we're like a 3-person team
Hmm.
that kind of pushes things. So you get better at writing books, you get better at podcasting, you get better at the piano, you get better at all of it. As long as you learn from the failures, and if you're never failing, then you are really not going to get anywhere because you're not learning. And yeah, and that's I don't know anybody that's had success in any business, but especially in ours who never fails. So you got to kind of tell the ego to go buzz off, and you have to seek out failure, and because that's how you grow. And I've got a great story now about brasshits.com. I mean, that's funny, and like I could have gotten upset because I was so proud. I was like, it's a play on my name. The name is in it. I wanted the visibility. Like, that's a really great idea until you like put the idea on paper. You're like, that's a horrible idea. So, but you don't know until then. I went to Lance. I was like, hey man, when we met for a concert that night or whatever, I was like, are you ready for this? And then I like, typed in the URL into my phone and showed him. And then he was like, yeah, that's not going to work, Andrew. I said, yeah, it turns out you're right, Lance. Thanks. Where were you like 3 days ago? You could have told me it was going to work.
So tell me what Pedal Note Media does. What are some of the ways that I'm assuming this is now your full-time business? So is the book published through Pedal Note Media and the podcasts? Is this your full-time business at this point?
It is not a full-time business. Both Lance and I are at this point are kind of the stereotypical portfolio career, where I have probably 9 income streams
Oh,
that are all small-ish,
yeah, sure.
and so, but they total, a living. And the book I'm putting out through Hitz Publications, which is my own LLC, which that series is because that predates Pedal Note Media. Um, Pedal Note Media, as of right now, just offers three podcasts, and then we've got plans in the future for in the near future. We're going to be getting into e-courses.
Okay, so hold on. So I mentioned 2 podcasts: the Brass Junkies, the Entrepreneurial Musician. Can you share with us what the third podcast is?
Yes, the third podcast is called Creative Careers Podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and that is by the Jennifer Rosenfeld and Julia Torgovitskaya of iCadenza, and which are 2 guests that I interviewed on the Entrepreneurial Musician. They are and also cadenza artists, so they're artist managers, and then iCadenza is a wonderful website that's job opportunities and career advice for musicians, performers, creative professionals, and arts educators. And so Jennifer is who hosts the podcast, and that's like just a once a month thing. Which is just talking. So it's similar to the Entrepreneurial Musician, and yet it's completely its own voice. But it's talking to to someone in the creative field and kind of how and why they do what they do. And so those are the 3 podcasts that we offer. And eventually, we're going to have a 4th podcast, which is going to be called the Band Director's Guide podcast, which is life has come up. That was going to be launched last month, but that's going to be probably co-hosted by me and my wife. My
Oh,
wife,
wow.
Yeah, my wife Tiffany Hitz is a rock star middle school band director here in Fairfax County, Virginia, and she guest conducts from this in the last well, I guess in a 3 month span she's guest conducting from Florida to Maine as a middle school band
Wow.
director, and she's just yeah she's really great, and has a wonderful way of explaining things, and so that's going to kind of go hand in hand with the band director's guide book series. And so the e-courses, I almost drove off the road, I think is where when I heard it, that in 2014 that there were $14 billion with a B of
Yes.
sales in e-courses.
Yep. Yep.
And so there's still kind of we've got some ideas. We're already working on our first, and so Lance and I are going to be producing some of those, and really I mean, we are already, as you said, podcasting is a lot of work.
It is a ton of work.
Yeah,
It's hard
yeah.
enough for me to do one a week. How in the world do you produce three or
It's,
four a week?
we do have, TEM is every week. Brass Junkies is every other week, and Creative Careers is once a month. So in that sense, it's a little bit easier than it's not for a week, because that would be that'd be a little much. But the and you it's really it's funny how you talk about being good at things right away. Even most overnight, well, Time for Three seems from an outside eye like an overnight success story. It's not, and if you listen to their discussion with you, it's like they played, and they played together a lot when they were at Curtis, and then this and then that. And then, the commercial success thing, like when it caught, it really caught.
Mhm.
But until the day before it caught, it hadn't caught. I mean, it's like, that's obviously, that's pretty obvious when you put it that way, but that's the way it is. And so a lot of, you have to, even the workflow of Pedal Note Media, we have, there's a great book by Jim Collins, which is called Good to Great, which is a fantastic read, which has been read by millions of people. Really what I'd love to do is just write the next Good to Great, and then I could just like hang out. So, but that's a little easier said than done. But he talks about the importance of having the right people on the bus, and not figuring out where your bus is going to go and then filling people that are willing to go there, but of putting the right people on the bus and then putting those people in the right seats,
Yeah.
and then figuring out where the bus is going. Because when you get the right people on the bus, they're a lot more okay with you needing to turn the bus and to go in a different direction, because they're on there because of who they are and who you are, not because of where the bus was going. That's the other thing for even a chamber group. My goodness, the hardest part is getting along. I promise you. I mean, absolutely, positively, the hardest part is getting along. And that's why, and that's another reason why, okay, you want to start a traditional brass quintet and you need a horn player, and it needs to be this man or this woman because they're the only real logical horn player. Well, if they're not the right person for the bus, then you're begging for trouble. Because if things hit and you're actually working a lot and you're spending a lot of time, and they don't have the same career goals or business vision or whatever, it's like getting the right people on the bus is really important. And then even the seats, we've had to kind of rearrange the seats a little bit because we have some help from some folks, and you just learn as a manager even to put people in working with their Lance teaches, he's like full-time at Carnegie Mellon. And he has a really cool job there where he meets with every single incoming freshman at the school at the beginning of their freshman year. And then he meets with them again right before they graduate.
Oh, wow.
And in the eyes of the dean, or in the words of the dean, Lance basically gives them, as freshmen, he gives them permission to do whatever the heck they want to do. Doesn't mean that they don't have to have there's obviously a set series of classes you have to complete whichever degree it is, but it's just, he just kind of he unleashes them into the wild, if you will, while they're still in school, to be able to go and do what they do. But he has a lot of meetings and things like that, which are not movable. If you're a college lesson teacher like I am, you can't disappear for a month, but you can move lessons around, and they're much more malleable. And as a result, my schedule, I can find time regularly easier than he can. But then he can do super deep dives on stuff. So I'm the one who actually uploads the podcast because those need to be done on a regular basis. And then he handles all of our money. And he deals with the tax guy. I don't even know who the tax guy is. It's like, because we don't need to both do that, and I have to handle the taxes for Hitz publications and as a freelance musician myself, it's not like I'm not versed in that stuff, but you start to kind of hone the roles even of everyone within even a small company, and putting everyone in there. But again, the way to do that is by having people not in the ideal role first. You have to start with failure, and then you learn from it, and then you just try again.
It's incredible. I think you've just given all the musicians listening to this interview a mini MBA course in an hour.
I should charge them a bunch of money then, right?
There you go. Everything from how to build a successful business team to marketing to finding your product, and just amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all your amazing wisdom, experience, and it sounds like you have something quite amazing together with Lance and, of course, yourself with all these incredible initiatives, these incredible business ideas to do something wonderful for the brass world and other musicians as well. So exciting. Just one last thing.
Yes.
If you could summarize, what has been the biggest benefit of having a podcast for you?
The biggest benefit of having a podcast, I would say, both Lance and I, when we got off of the road, we wanted to figure out, Lance has a son. I have a son. We're both very, I'm married. Lance has a very serious girlfriend. We're both super busy, as is 99% of everyone listening to my voice right now. So this is not anything unique, but, we wanted to figure out, moving forward, and he's almost 50 and I've turned 40, that we're at the point in our lives where impact is the main thing that we wanted the main criteria for whatever we were doing moving forward. And we realized that the Brass Junkies was going to be a way that, even though a podcast is a lot of work, but it doesn't involve us leaving our houses. It doesn't involve us missing our kids' birthdays or our anniversaries or anything like that. That it was a way for us to impact a large number of people through getting them access and getting them inspired by hearing the stories of of a lot of our. It's cool now. I get to interview some of my heroes from when I was a kid, and then also for TEM, I'm passionate about that artists we spend so much time in a room alone, getting good at what we are, at what we're doing. And I never spoken with you until we got on this call, and I know that you have spent thousands of hours with just you and a piano, because I know your music, and you don't play like that unless you've done that. And I'm passionate about empowering people to be able to get all of that hard work heard by people, and to I'm passionate about getting people excited to use all of those skills to try and create something that is going to change the world. Even if it's the world doesn't mean, obviously, again, you're not impacting, your piano lessons are not impacting either of my neighbors. So, one's a landscaper and the other works for the government. I mean, it's like they're not your target audience. But that's the thing, is that, most people in the world have never heard Yo-Yo Ma play the cello. I mean, it's math, Now, a few more people have heard Yo-Yo Ma play the cello than have heard my podcast. I think that's safe to say, just a couple. But the point is that if you find a segment of the world, of the population, that you can make an impact on, then that kind of thing starts to snowball. And I meet students all the time who say, man, I just discovered the Entrepreneurial Musician, and I'm like, I can't get enough of it. I'm in the process of binge listening to every single episode, and it's given me ideas for this, that, whatever, and it helped to convince me to make this decision or to whatever. And that's that really kind of that's the main impact, is just that the main benefit has been just the impact, and then in a reciprocal way, the impact that it's had on Lance and myself, for the Brass Junkies or just me for TEM, that I get out of bed in the morning wanting to share all of this stuff that I've learned through a bunch of failures and then some successes as a result. And as was shared with you and I, face to face back in the day, before podcasting was around, and having great teachers who didn't just teach me music. Rex Martin at Northwestern, who was my teacher there, who just, my goodness, his career has been fascinating, and he spent a lot of time educating us on the career and on being a freelance musician and on how to behave once you get into a serious orchestra, and just a lot of that stuff, and led by example as well. And it's like, I can just do that as you are. We're now able to do that on a huge scale, because he used to do that for 15 of us in the studio masterclass Northwestern. It's like, now you can do it for thousands of people, for $20 a hosting a month, and a whole lot of work,
Yes.
a lot of work. But in terms of the ability to get the message spread far and wide we've never had this ability until the last 10 years or so. What we're doing wasn't a possibility, and now it is for anybody, which is just, it's an incredible time to be alive. It really is.
I thought that was going to be my last question, but I just have one more,
Sure.
really brief. And if you don't mind sharing very quickly, what equipment and software do you use to produce your podcast?
Good question. I have a Shure 58 microphone. I have got a
Now that's a traditional
that
microphone.
is a very traditional microphone.
How do you connect that to your computer? Because I know a lot of musicians may be wondering, how do you connect musical microphones to a computer?
I paused because I had to lean away from the mic to go look at the. I have a 4-channel mixer, which is a Xenix 802, and I bought all of this stuff on Amazon and had it delivered the next day. Which you can take an XLR cable, which will go straight out of the microphone and straight into into that, and then I've simply got a cable which runs from the computer. We're talking on Skype right now, and a cable that goes straight out of the headphone jack in the back of my iMac, that goes straight into that mixer.
Oh.
And then I also have I have an Edirol, which is actually a discontinued recording device, but there are others, like you can get a Zoom X2, H2.
H2N or H4N, yes.
Yep, exactly. Yes, thank you. That will work as well. So I then have a cable that's coming from the mixer straight into the Edirol, which is where I'm recording everything.
So this is actually an external recording device.
It is, yes.
So you're not recording on your computer. You're just capturing the audio on your computer.
Yep.
And then
I have
through
my
those
headphones.
cables, through those cables, you actually record it on a separate device. And then what?
And then the last step of the actual recording is that my headphones plug straight into the Edirol, so I'm hearing exactly what is being captured by the recording device, and not anything else, just so that I can check levels and things like that. And that's what the mixer enables you to do. And also, along the lines of failing, the first time that I set up the mixer, and this system, it took me 20 minutes. I mean, I couldn't, it just kind of looks like it's in a foreign language.
Well, I think for some people, they would say that's light speed.
Well,
I think 20 hours for other people.
and that's the beautiful thing about YouTube now.
There you go.
There's a website called podcastanswerman.com where there are some
Cliff
free
Ravenscroft.
tutorials, which he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I just take the SD card that's in the Edirol and I stick it right into the iMac, and I then upload. We have a Slack channel, which is a really, really great tool for workflow stuff. Which is, it does a lot of what email does and a lot better.
What is Slack channel exactly?
So Slack is a program that you can. It has a web interface, but it also has there's a Mac app for it. I'm guessing there's a PC app for it as well, and it's on mobile devices, which is a place where a team of people can communicate. It can act like a group chat function. You can also share files. You can share Word files. You can share sound files. You can share images, etc., and it's highly searchable. And so email, I'm not a fan of email. I use it a lot, obviously. We all do. But when I've got when the Pedal Note Media stuff is like mixed in with people sending me evites for their 3-year-old's birthday, it's just and obviously labels and things like that. There's ways around that, but Slack is awesome. So I actually upload the files to our Slack channel, which is as simple as I just drag it off of the SD card right onto Slack and then let go, and it loads up. We have someone who actually physically puts the episodes together for us.
Oh, that's cool. So somebody else is doing the editing for you.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, nice.
And then we actually have another person who used to download every episode every time, like as soon as it was released. And he lives out west, and he's actually my graphic designer as well. But he's a big fan of both podcasts. We've formalized with him for Brass Junkies. He actually listens to each of the episodes ahead of time, just to make sure that that the levels are all good and that that there's nothing that needs tweaking. And then he gives a thumbs up through Slack that everything's good. And then I take it, and we use Libsyn, which is probably, I think, the biggest one in the industry, although there's a few others, which is libsyn.com. To actually distribute the podcast. And you do have to go through that. Podcast Answer Man is super helpful for all this stuff. But you have to apply for iTunes, which is it's not hard. It's just busy work. And it would be hard if you tried to figure it out just all on your own. But if you just watch a tutorial like that at podcastanswerman.com, then it's quite easy. And then there's a few day, window, and Lance does the show notes for it. And then we also upload to SoundCloud, which annoyingly you can't schedule, so Libsyn you can schedule. And so it'll come out a month from now, it'll come out the minute that you tell it to on any day. SoundCloud has to be done kind of in real time. And we're on Stitcher as well, which was something that we just had to apply for, and that just automatically pulls it off of iTunes. And then we do some blog posts as well. So the Entrepreneurial Musician, I actually do the quality control because I also do exhaustive show notes. If you go to andrewhitz.com/show notes, then you can see a link to every single. We're at 50 episodes as I'm recording this now. And each one I pull a quote off of my favorite quote from the episode, and also all the talking points and any links to any books or podcasts or websites that the guest mentions during the interview. So
fantastic. Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Andrew, thank you so much for this crash course on being an entrepreneurial musician from the expert himself. I'd encourage everybody to re-listen to this episode, especially if you're a musician serious about going to business or expanding your business potential. Listen to this episode several times. Andrew really packs in a full MBA's worth of information and great tips for you, and we are certainly going to have a ton of links in the show notes. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to share your amazing expertise, and I wish you and Lance the very, very best success in all your enterprises.
Yeah, if I could just say, well, first of all, thank you. But if I could just say congratulations to you for having this channel for what you're providing for the world, because it's a real resource for music fans and for musicians, and I hope you keep at it.
Oh, thanks so much. For links to Andrew's website and podcasts, visit the show notes at amusicallife.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to get the latest updates on future episodes. You can also subscribe to A Musical Life through iTunes or with your favorite podcast playing app, and get new episodes automatically downloaded onto your smartphone tablet, or computer. If you enjoy these stories about all things musical and the things that move our souls, please tell a friend about this show and consider posting a short review on iTunes at amusicallife.com/review. Thank you for your support. Until next time, I'm Hugh Sung, and I wish you a musical life.